The Muslimin say that Noah went into the ark on the 10th of Rajab, the 7th month of the year, and came out of it the 10th of Al-Muharram, the 1st month of the year, which therefore became a fast, so that the whole time of Noah's being in the ark, according to them, was 6 months. And Shia narrations do confirm that the 10th of the 1st month, and often the day before or after it, or preferably a day before or after it, is also a recommended fast. Page 198:1. These were the angels who were sent to acquaint Abraham with the promise of Isaac and to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Some of the commentators say they were 12 or 9 or 10 in number, but others, agreeably to Judeo-Christian scripture, say they were but 3. These: Gabriel, Michael, and Israfil. Note 2 of 198. This seems to be the true sense of the passage, but according to a different reading of the vow, some interpret it, "Except thy wife," meaning that being Lot here is commanded to take his family with him, except his wife. Wherefore, the commentators cannot agree whether Lot's wife went forth with him or not, some denying it and pretending that she was left behind and perished in the coming destruction. Well, not pretending. And others affirming it, saying that when she heard the noise of the storm and overthrow the cities, she turned back, lamenting their fate, and was immediately struck down and killed by one of the stones mentioned a little lower, a punishment she just merited for her infidelity and disobedience to her husband. Well, her misbelieving the husband. Differing in faith is not the same as being infidel, and Islam does not pick up this rhetoric, no matter what you see in translations of infidel and pagan and heathen and all that. Page 200, note 1. This is not to be strictly understood as if either the punishment of the damned should ever have an end, or the heavens and the earth should endure forever, the expression being only used by way of image or comparison, which need not agree in every point with the thing signified. Some, however, think that the future heavens and earth, into which the present shall be changed, are here meant. And one of the things about the Quran is that you can take things literally and everything, and there's figurative meanings in almost everything, and they don't have to conflict. And if they do conflict, that's, one's own personal issue that one would deal with. Page 203, 1. This well, say some, was a certain well near Jerusalem, or not far from the river Jordan, but others call it the well of Egypt or Midian. The commentators tell us that when the sons of Jacob had gotten Joseph with them in the field, they began to abuse and to beat him so unmercifully that they had killed him, and not Judah, on his crying out for help, insisted on the promise they had made not to kill him, but to cast him into the well, whereupon they let him down a little way, but as he held by the sides of the well, they bound him and took off his inner garment, designing to stain it with blood, and to deceive their father. Joseph begged hard to have his garment returned to him, but to no purpose, his brothers telling him, with a sneer, that the 11 stars and the sun and the moon might clothe him and keep him company. When they let him down halfway, they let him fall thence to the bottom, and there, being water in the well, though the scripture says to the contrary, well, the Christian scripture says to the contrary, the Jewish scripture says to the contrary, but we see in this story, as in others, that there's contradictory variations. he was obliged to get upon a stone, on which, as he stood weeping, the angel Gabriel came to him with the revelation mentioned immediately. So we're in Surah 12, obviously. Note 2, page 203. His name was Kitfir, or Itfir, a corruption of Potiphar. While different language is using the same, speaking the same individual, isn't quite the same as a corruption of. And he was a man of great consideration, being superintendent of the royal treasury. The commentators say that Joseph came into his servants at 17 and lived with him 13 years, and that he was made prime minister in the 33rd year of his age and died at 120. They, who suppose Joseph was sold twice, Joseph was twice sold, differ as to the price the Egyptian paid for him. Some saying it was 20 dinars of gold, a pair of shoes, and 2 white garments, and others that it was a large quantity of silver or gold. Page 204:1. Through extreme surprise at the wonderful beauty of Joseph, which surprised Zuleika, foreseeing put knives into their hands on purpose that this accident might happen. Some writers have observed, on occasion of this passage, that it is customary in the East for lovers to testify the violence of their passion by cutting themselves. As a sign, they would spend their blood in the service of the person beloved, which is true enough, but I do not find that any of the commentators suppose these Egyptian ladies had any such design. And, well, what people do that are rebelling against society is quite different than, acceptable custom. Page 205, note 1. Notwithstanding what some ancient authors write to the contrary, it often rains in winter in the Lower Egypt, and even snow has been observed to fall at Alexandria, contrary to the express assertion of Seneca. In the Upper Egypt, indeed, toward the cataracts of the Nile, it rains very seldom. However, some suppose that the rains here mentioned are intended of those which should fall in Ethiopia and occasion the swelling of the Nile, the great cause of the fertility of Egypt, or else those which should fall in the neighboring countries, which were also afflicted with famine during the same time. 206, note 1. The commentators say that Joseph, being taken out of prison, after he had washed and changed his clothes, was introduced to the king, whom he saluted in the Hebrew tongue. Well, they didn't call it Hebrew, they called it Aramea for the entire period of the biblical individuals, but after it became a Jewish-only thing, they started calling it Hebrew. You literally see it spelled out that it was the Aramea language. And, all the texts of Tanakh were written in that. It varied from 22 to 30 letters, by the way. And on the king's asking what language there was, he answered that it was the language of his fathers. This prince, they say, understood no less than 70 languages, and every one which he discoursed with Joseph, who answered him in the same, at which the king, greatly marveling, desired him to relate his dream, which he did, describing the most minute circumstances, whereupon the king placed Joseph by him on his throne, and made him his wazir, or chief minister. Some say that his master, Kitfir, dying about this time, he not only succeeded him in his place, but, by the king's command, married the widow, his late mistress, whom he found to be a virgin, and who bare him Ephraim and Manasseh, so that according to this tradition she was the same woman who was called Asenath by Moses. This supposed marriage, which authorized their amours, probably encouraged the Muslim scholars to make use of the loves of Joseph and Zuleika as an allegorical emblem of the spiritual love between the Creator and the creature. Poets, right? Not scholars. Well, often scholars, because to be a good poet, you gotta know something about the language, right? God and the soul, just as the Christians apply the Song of Solomon to the same mystical purpose. Well, because the literal application of the Song of Solomon didn't quite go over so well, although it does indicate that the punishment for sex outside of marriage should be the same as punishment for sex outside of marriage, regardless of the act. So that was a good lesson. And, siblings trying to, brothers trying to keep their sister pure and protected. There's some good lesson to that too. Page 208, 1. The occasion of this suspicion, it says, was that Joseph, having been brought up by his father's sister, she became so fond of him that, when he grew up and Jacob designed to take him from her, she contrived the following stratagem to keep him. Having a girdle, which had once belonged to Abraham, she girt it about the child, and then pretending that she lost it, caused strict search to be made for it, and it being at length found on Joseph, he was adjudged, according to the law of the family, to be delivered to her as property. Some, however, say that Joseph actually stole an idol of gold, which belonged to his mother's father, and destroyed it, the story probably being taken from Rachel's stealing the images of Laban, and others tell us that he once stole a goat or a hen to give to a poor man. Now, Islam doesn't attribute any such thing to a prophet, much less the Joseph thing. The actual thing, he was, there was an attempt to fabricate such a case that was, exposed, and so that, because someone wanted to have Joseph serve them, and his father figured out what exposed the plot, basically. Page 209, note 1. His father and Leah, his mother's sister, whom he looked on as his mother after Rachel's death. Al-Baidawi tells us that Joseph sent carriages and provisions for his father and his family, and that he and the king of Egypt went forth to meet them. He adds that the number of children in Israel who entered Egypt with him was 72, and that when they were led out thence by Moses, they were increased to 600,570 men, and upwards besides the old people and children. And what if it was only 600, what if it was only like 6,570, or, some other number that was much smaller? Because we do find that a couple towns in Goshen left, but I don't think there was that many people. There's also indication that the number is probably 100th what they claim. Page 211, what the Jews and Christians claim for it. Page 211, note 1. The collar here mentioned is an engine, something like a pillory, but light enough for the criminal to walk about with. Besides the hole to fix it on the neck, there is another for one of the hands, which is thereby fastened to the neck. And in this matter the Muslims suppose the reprobates will appear at the day of judgment. Some understand this passage figuratively of the misbelievers being bound in the chains of error and obstinacy. Page 212, note 1. This passage was revealed on the following occasion. Amr ibn al-Tufail and Arbad ibn Rabi'ah, the brother of Labid, went to Mohammed with an intent to kill him, and Amr began to dispute with him concerning the chief points of his doctrine, while Arbad, taking a compass, went behind him to dispatch him with his sword. But the prophet, perceiving his design, implored God's protection, whereupon Arbad was immediately struck dead by thunder, and Amr was struck with a pestilential boil, of which he died in a short time, in a miserable condition. Jalaluddin, however, tells another story, saying that Mohammed, having sent one to invite a certain man to embrace his religion, the person put this question to the missionary: "Who is this apostle, and what is God? Is he of gold, or of silver, or of brass?" Upon which a thunderbolt struck off his skull and killed him. Page 214. Note 1. These are miracles which the Quraysh required of Muhammad, demanding that he would, by the power of his Quran, either remove the mountains from about Mecca, or they might have delicious gardens in the room, or that he would oblige the wind to transport them with their merchandise to Syria. According to which tradition, the words here translated are "the earth cleaved in sunder" should be rendered "or the earth be traveled over in an instant," or else raised to life. Qusay ibn Kilab and others of their ancestors to bear witness to him, whereupon this passage was revealed. And, of course, the miracles were provided that were the best ones for them to have, for their guidance. Miracles for one's fancies isn't exactly, Page 215, note 1. Literally, the mother of the book, which is meant the preserved table, from which all the written revelations, which have been from time to time published to mankind, according to the several dispensations, are transcripts. Page 218, note 1. What is particularly intended in this passage? By the good word and the evil word, the expositors differ. But the first seems to mean Page 218, note 1. What is particularly intended in this passage by the good word and the evil word? The expositors differ. But the first seems to mean the profession of God's unity, the inviting others to the true religion or to the Quran itself, and the latter the acknowledging a plurality of gods, the seducing of others to idolatry, or the obstinate opposition of God's prophets. Page 219, note 1, i.e. Ishmael and his posterity. The Muslims say that Hagar, his mother, belonged to Sarah, who gave her to Abraham, and that on her bearing him this son, Sarah became so jealous of her that she prevailed on her husband to turn them both out of doors, whereupon he sent them to the territory of Mecca, where God caused the fountain of Zamzam to spring forth for the relief and consideration of which the Jorhamites, who were the masters of the country, permitted them to settle among them. And we have Hagarite Psalms in the Bible to indicate much of this. And there's, of course, a difference between what Islam says and what Muslims say. It's not always exactly the same thing. So, I mean, not in this case. Well, throw in some biblical Joramites. I'm not sure what the Arabic is that they're referring to or whatever, or if they're even referring to that. Note 2 of 219. Abraham put up this petition to God before he knew that his parents were the enemies of God. Some suppose his mother was a true believer and therefore read it in the singular, and my father. Others fancy that, while others consider that by his parents, the patriarch here means Adam and Eve. That way of speaking does work too, but note 3 of 219. This, the Muslimin suppose will come to pass at the last day, the earth becoming white and even, or some will have it of silver, and the heavens of gold. Page 220, note 1. For the Muslimin, consider that the devils endeavor to ascend to the constellations, to pry into the actions and overhear the discourse of the inhabitants of heaven. Of course, there's a difference between heaven, as in the skies, and the paradise of the afterworlds in the Islamic vision, and to tempt them. They also consider these evil spirits to have had the liberty of entering any of the heavens until the birth of Jesus, when they were excluded 3 of them. But on the birth of Mohammed, they were forbidden the other 4. Well, the lowest one is the one with the stars and the planets and stuff, so but being limited even within that, as Surah 55 indicates, and they can't transgress the boundaries of even the skies without permission. Page 255, note 1. The Muslimin considered that the earth, when first created, was smooth and equal, and thereby liable to a circular motion, as well as the celestial orbs, and that the angels asking, who could be able to stand on so tottering a frame, God fixed it the next morning by throwing the mountains on it. Yeah, a lot of people throw things out, but the mountains actually were established over time, and the earth probably was a solid piece, you could say. But there's always been movement on the earth, so. But in general, you can say that even, it's not that the mountains are, in some way speaking, you could say that that still rings true as is. But note 2 of 225. Some understand this passage figuratively of God's disappointing their wicked designs, but others suppose the words literally relate to the tower which Nimrod, and the Muslimin, would have to be the son of Canaan, the son of Ham, and so the nephew of Cush, and not his son, built in Babel, and carried it to an immense height, 5,000 cubits, say some, foolishly purposing thereby to ascend to heaven and to wage war with the inhabitants of that place. But God frustrated his attempt, utterly overthrowing the tower by a violent wind and earthquake. Page 229, note 1. This same being not only good food, but a useful remedy in several distempers, particularly those occasioned by phlegm. There is a story that a man came once to Mohammed and told him that his brother was afflicted with a violent pain in his belly, upon which the Prophet bade him give him some honey. The fellow took his advice, but soon after coming again told him that the medicine had done his brother no manner of service. Mohammed answered, "Go and give him more honey, for God speaks the truth, and thy brother's belly lies." And the dose being repeated, the man, by God's mercy, was immediately cured. Page 231. Honey is a healing thing. It's best done on an empty stomach, by the way. Page 230, note 1. This verse, which was the occasion of the conversion of Uthman ibn Matun, the commentators say, containeth the whole which it is a man's duty either to perform or to avoid, and is alone a sufficient demonstration of what is said in the foregoing verse under the 3 things here commanded. They understand the belief of God's unity without inclining to atheism on the one hand or polytheism on the other. So no monolarity or plurality of personages or that sort of thing. Obedience to the commands of God and charity towards those in distress. And under the 3 things forbidden, they comprehend all corrupt and carnal afflictions, all false doctrines and heretical opinions, and all injustices toward man. it's good to summarize the yeses and the nos and various things like that. Page 232, note 1. This was a great objection made by the Meccans to the authority of the Quran, for when Muhammad insisted as a proof of its divine original that it was impossible a man so utterly unacquainted with the learning as himself could compose such a book, they replied that he had one or more assistants in the forgery, but as to the particular person or persons suspected of this confederacy, the traditions vary. One say that it was Jabbar, a Greek servant to Amr ibn al-Hadrami, who could read and write well. Another, that they were Jabbar and Yasar, 2 slaves who followed the trade of sword cutters at Mecca and used to read their Pentateuch and Gospel, and had often Muhammad for their auditor when they passed that way. A lot of suppositions were filled in later by some of the Christian commentators. Oh, there was a Christian over there. He must have, Another tells us that as one Aish or Yaish, a domestic of Al-Hawaytib ibn Abd al-Uzza, who was a man of some learning and had embraced Islam. Another supposed that it was one Qais, a Christian, whose house Muhammad frequented. Another, that it was Adas, a servant of Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, and another writes that it was Salman the Persian. According to some Christian writers, Abdullah ibn Salam, the Jew who was so intimate with Muhammad, friendship, learning and whatnot, named by one according to the Hebrew dialect, Abdias ben Salon, and by another, Abdullah Salon. Now, Salman was the Persian, and Salam were individuals that they came to Muhammad to hang around him to learn the faith closely. Abdullah Salam was assisting to him in the compiling his revelations. This Jew, Dr. Verdout, confounds with Salman the Persian, who was a very different man, as a late author has observed before me. Wherefore, and for that we may have occasion to speak of Salman hereafter, it may be proper to add a brief extract of a story as told by himself. He is of a good family of Ispahan, and in his younger years he left the religion of his country to embrace Christianity, and, traveling to Syria, was advised by a certain monk of Amuria to go into Arabia, where a prophet was expected to arise about that time, who should establish the religion of Abraham, and whom he should know, among other things, by the seal of prophecy between his shoulders. Salman performed the journey, and meeting with Muhammad at Koba, where he rested in his flight to Medina, soon found him to be the person he sought and professed Islam. The general opinion of the Christians, however, is that the chief helped Muhammad in the contriving of his Quran was an Nestorian monk named Sergius, supposed to be the same person with the monk Buhaira, with whom Muhammad in his younger years had some conference at Basra, a city of Syria. Damascena, where the monk resided. To conform with which supposition, a passage has been produced from an Arab writer who says that Buhaira's name in the books of the Christians is Sergius, but this is only a conjecture, and another tells us that his true name was Sa'id or Felix, and his surname was Buhaira. But be that as it will if Bahira and Sergius were the same man. I do not find the least intimation in the Mohammed writers that he ever quitted his monastery to go into Arabia, as is supposed by the Christians. They're just trying to make up details. They didn't think it out.